So, my jealous uncle, he takes our family house after his dad passes away, sells it, and also wants to sell the family business, which, by the way, my grandpa, his father, said, please, whatever you do in this lifetime, make sure the family business lives on. Well, as soon as he passed away, my uncle had other ideas. And you know what? I'm not really going to stand for it. Somebody needs to stand up to this guy and not allow him to run the family household into the ground. I'm going to do something about it, and my uncle is going to hate me.
Your enemies are closer than you think. I would not need to take you back to a few years ago when it all started, so you can properly understand my story. My father was born into a family that lived in Oregon, Willamette Valley, to be precise. He was the first son of his father, and he had a brother, Uncle Stewart. They were both born into a family that had a thriving winery business in the area, and the business had been in the family for years before my father and his brother came into the picture. My dad, after college, decided to start up a real estate firm. His brother, Uncle Stewart, worked at a Vineyard Vista winery, the family business. Even though my father was trying to start up his own and never depended on whatever came from the family business, he, just like my brother, had a little stake in the business, and the time came when their father was gravely ill, and he just knew that he was not going to cheat death this time around. So he summoned his sons. My father went with my mom down to the family house, and Uncle Stewart was already there. Their father began to address them, and from the things that he said, you would know that this was the wish of a dying man who was just ready to accept his fate. He admonished my father and Uncle Stewart that they were to live in the unity and did all that they could to make the family business outlive them, just as it was going to outlive him. He said that he had spoken with his lawyer, but he wanted them to know ahead of time what his decisions were and the reason why he had taken them. He said that my father was going to be the chairman of the business while my uncle would continue to manage it. Grandpa said that the reason for his decision was because my father was the first son, and the fact that he was able to start up a thriving business was the proof that he could oversee the winery, while my uncle would support him with the knowledge that he had gotten after years of working at the winery. Grandpa went ahead and even let Uncle Stewart know that he would be getting the house after he was gone, and I believe this was another form of compensation. Grandpa was still speaking when Uncle Stewart reacted and challenged what he claimed to be an unfair decision. He accused Grandpa right there of overlooking his years of labor. Uncle Stewart claimed that while my father was busy, running his own business and still profiting from the winery, he stayed in the family business and has given it his all. My father tried to calm him down to avoid him further disrespecting their father, but Uncle Stewart refused to be contained. He walked out and promised Grandpa he would never see his face again. Well, Grandpa died 2 weeks later, and when my father went to inform his brother about it, he said that their father had died from the very day when he took, what was supposed to be his and handed it to my dad. Uncle Stewart told my father that neither he nor his family would be attending the funeral, and that was exactly how it played out. My father had been trying to bear with his brother, but he soon got angry when Uncle Stewart did not show up for Grandpa's funeral. The embarrassment that my father had to face was massive because virtually everyone knew that he had a brother, so his absence from the burial was indicative of a problem in the family. My father reacted a few days after Grandpa was laid to rest, and he did this by bringing in some other people as the new manager of the Vineyard Vista winery. I was done with college at the time, and I had studied computer science. But rather than get a job, I was planning to delve into the path of programming. So I was at home with my mother while my father was trying to oversee the business that Granddad had left him. Uncle Stewart showed up at the house and was banging on the door with all of his might. My mother and I were surprised and somewhat scared, as we didn't really know what to expect from whomever it was that wanted to knock the door down. But the moment we heard, we heard it, the barking of my mother's name, I immediately opened up the door, and Uncle Stewart just asked my mother to warn her husband, otherwise he would get more than what he bargained for. My mom immediately took the phone and reached out to my father. She asked him to rush down to the house as there was an emergency. My father was at home a few months after the call, and the moment my mother told him that his brother had shown up and caused trouble, my father just sighed and asked us to ignore him. My father said that he had replaced my uncle as the manager of the firm, and he had instructions of the security men not to grant him access to the vineyard. Uncle Stewart had shown up, and after he was denied access, he raised a little dust before leaving in anger. And that was why he showed up at the house. He promised to get a restraining order against him. So Uncle Stewart came to apologize to my father before my father carried out his restraining order plan. My father was not willing to extend the hand of friendship or brotherhood in this case, but my mother talked him into forgiveness with the claim that Uncle Stewart was still his brother after all. It was this advice that led to our downfall, and I was not comfortable with my uncle's sudden change of heart. My father forgave me all the same and reinstated him as the manager. Things began to go smoothly, but I was still not comfortable with the way Uncle Stewart had worked himself back into our lives. We were hit with a string of terrible news a few months after the dust had settled. Everything just started to go downhill for the winery, and because my father tried everything to salvage the situation, it equally affected his real estate business. Another winery, Serenity Vineyards, popped up, and our sales began to drop absolutely drastically. There were months when the profit was not enough to pay the salaries of the workers, and my father had to do so from his purse. He held on and tried to remain positive, just as every good businessman would, but things only got worse from there on out. We moved from dealing with the competition from Serenity Vineyards to struggling with faulty machinery. My father called his brothers so they could come up with a solution to salvage the situation, and Uncle Stewart suggested that they lay off some staff or maybe reduce the salaries and merge the wineries. We'll see if we can merge with Serenity Vineyards. Dad was willing to slash the salaries of the workers, but the merger idea was a no-go for him. He reminded Uncle Stewart that it was a family business, and the merging with some other company meant that it was no longer to be a family business. Uncle Stewart then suggested to him that, well, obviously the only option available to them was to invest some funds into the winery. My father noted that the kind of money that my uncle claimed was needed to revamp the business was not available, and he was not ready to obtain a loan from a loan shark, as he had heard tales about that. Uncle Stewart was keen on helping to save the family business, and he asked my dad to give him a couple of weeks to see how he could raise some capital. Well, Uncle Stewart returned 3 days later with some good news. He said that a friend of his, Mr. Matt, was willing to borrow my dad the money, but he would need some form of collateral. My father asked what could be used as collateral, and get this, his brother suggested our home. My father immediately expressed his disinterest because he could not use the house where we lived as collateral for a business that had a 50-50 shot of survival. Uncle Stewart immediately reminded him that it was their father's dying wish that the business would outlive us. He encouraged my father that his friend was not going to deal with him like those loan sharks, even though he did not meet the agreement. My father collected the loan and handed it over to his brother, who showed up 3 weeks later and still maintained that the business was failing. Dad didn't know what to do. He had practically borrowed and used our home as a collateral, and the business was still struggling. He asked his brother what to do, but he said that my father has two options: investing more money or temporarily shutting down the business until he was financially buoyant to start it up again. So Uncle Stewart showed up at the house a few months later with his friend, and as my father tried to ask for more time, Mr. Matt claimed it was my uncle that was owed. We all looked at my uncle in surprise, and he affirmed that Mr. Matt had said this with a smile. He asked my parents how it felt to be powerless. He told them that he was glad that the family business did not do well because it meant that my father would no longer boss over him, and Grandpa was not around this time to tilt the situation in my father's favor. Things got pretty tough for us, and we struggled for about 2 years until I made a breakthrough in the tech world. It's been 7 years now, and though my parents and I are now very comfortable, we recently had a fallout, and you would not believe who was behind it: Uncle Stewart. We had cut off contact with him, or rather, he cut off contact with us, and we had heard nothing about Serenity Vineyards ever since. Well, we moved to a different state to start all over again. I came back home yesterday after, oh boy, having a very stressful day at work, and it would be an understatement to say that I was really tired. The plan was just to go home and unwind, but I had a very distasteful surprise waiting for me at the house. I get into the house, and my mother was the one who opened up the door for me. I saw my uncle comfortably seated in my parlor with a bottle of wine and a plate of grilled chicken, which was almost done devouring it. And how and why the hell was this guy comfortably seated in my house and receiving a treat after everything? It was guts for me. How could my parents, who were right there, permit such nonsense to be happening? My uncle immediately began to sing my praises. He talked about how proud he was that I did not let my parents down and how I had made sure that they were living a comfortable life. There were lots of things going on in my head, and I had to exercise serious self-restraint as I watched the jerk's oily mouth spew absolute trash. Uncle Stuart rounded off by saying that I was the kind of child that every parent prayed to get. I didn't say anything. I just looked at my parents, who knew that I was obviously upset that they let him into my house after everything that he's put us through. I walked over to the parlor to avoid taking action that I would end up regretting. I banged on the door in my room and wanted to wait till my uncle had left so I could take it up with my parents, but I could not ignore them. The more I heard his voice, the more difficult it was to ignore his presence, so I just let my emotions lead me. I stormed out of the room and walked straight to the parlor where my uncle had a glass in his mouth. I immediately hit it out of his hand, and it made a mess as it shattered on the floor. Everybody was startled, but it was only the beginning of what was about to happen right there. I lifted my uncle from the chair and suspended him in the air with both hands as I asked what gave him the guts to show up in my house and eat my food like we were one big happy family. My parents immediately rushed to intervene by claiming that he had apologized for everything, but their words did not have any impact on me as I was so angry. I finally let go of my grip and gave him a few seconds to get out of my house before he got the beating of his life. Uncle Stuart immediately just ran out of the house, and my parents have been angry with me ever since for disrespecting an elder. Well, I don't give an absolute duck. Update number 1. The leopard does not change its spots. This has been 3 weeks since my last update, and just as I suspected, there's always an ulterior motive with my uncle. My parents have not been happy with me ever since I kicked Uncle Stuart out of the home. Things have gone from bad to worse, ever since they have repeatedly failed to make me reach out to him. I asked my parents if they'd forgotten how he took our house and kicked us out, but they insisted I be mature and even said that he was family after all. I still refused, and my parents decided to keep malice with me, and though I initially played the game, I soon gave up. I was not cool with the way my parents painted me like this, so I decided to just go ahead and reach out to my uncle and know why he had even come by the house in the first place. I invited Uncle Stuart to the house, and he came looking like he could die any second. Me and my parents were already seated there, and I purposely wore a look that made him very uncomfortable. My father was the one who spoke first. You see, he tells his brother that the thought he was not in support of the way that I had treated him, he being my uncle, had no right to hold it against me after all that he had done to us. Uncle Stuart then said that he did not bear any grudges, and as a matter of fact, he had come to apologize to me for the way that he treated us years ago. He claimed that he now realized his mistake and was willing to make up for it in whatever way he could. So guys, I was doing my best not to say a word because it would be disrespectful, but I could not hold it back anymore when my uncle said that he was willing to make up for how he had wronged us. Did I tell you that he had gone ahead years ago to sell the house that our father had given him and invested the money in his business, Serenity Vineyards? Yeah, he was the owner, and that's how treacherous he was. He did not just sell off the inherited house, but he equally sold off my father's house, which he gotten via manipulation. I asked him how exactly he planned on doing that, but he just bowed his head in shame. Anywho, my parents made up, and though I claimed that everything was all good, I was still skeptical about my uncle. Uncle Stuart began to show up at the house, and I did not like the fact that he was now getting too comfortable. He met with me 3 days ago and claimed that he was in dire need of financial help. He claimed that he was neck-deep in debt and needed a certain amount of money. The amount that he was asking for was huge, and I was, compelled to ask how he had gotten into debt in the first place. Uncle Stuart claimed that he had been undergoing a series of health challenges, and that was how he spent everything that he had, including the resources that should have gone into, his wine press. From the way that he went about the whole thing, he gave the impression that his wine press had equally shut down, and I asked him to give me 3 days so I could think about the matter and see how I could help him if I could. I discussed the issues with my parents, and my father said it was not something I should hesitate to do. He said that we had all moved past the wrongdoings of his brother, and if anybody had the right to be more hurt, it was he. But he still wanted the best for his bro. I thought carefully about it, and something still felt off, so I decided to do a little digging of my own. I called a friend of mine who still lives in Oregon and asked him to check up on Serenity Vineyards for me. I wanted to know if they were still operating, and he got back to me yesterday and said that the wine press was actually in bad shape. But my uncle was desperately looking for money to clear his debt, as he had borrowed a huge amount of money using the wine press as collateral, and it seemed as though his creditors were at his neck. So you see why I said that the leopard does not change its spots, right? Uncle Stuart wants to take advantage of my parents and me, and that's why he resurfaced after so many years away. He's not sick, he just wants to settle his debt and save his business. Well, he would soon learn that two can play the same type of game, buddy. Update number 2. Here we go again. Guys, I made an update last month, and I'm just certain that you would want to hear how I'm beating my uncle up at his own game. My uncle's currently frustrated, and that's because I'm beating him at his own game. I called my uncle over to the house to give him the money that he had asked for. He was super grateful, but what he did not realize was that the money was part of a well-scripted revenge plot that I had planned. Uncle Stuart was grateful and spoken about how the family was supposed to look out for each other. I played along like I did not know what he was, an opportunist who was just trying to manipulate us once again. After I had gotten his account details, I transferred 1/10 of the money to him, and right there he confirmed that he had received the credit alert from his bank, and I promised to give the rest in a week or 2. My uncle left the house that day, and he was super elated. I didn't stop there. I called him back to the house a week later, and I was becoming friendlier than I was with him, but it was an act. The whole thing was so convincing that even my parents marveled at how warm I was growing towards my uncle. I reassured my uncle that day that I still had him in my heart. I told him there was a lot of projects that I was handling, and that's why I had yet to give him the total amount that he had asked for. I then went ahead and promised him that I would see to it that he got the money sooner than he expected. Uncle Stuart thanked me and started off with the whole praise, singing thing. I just smiled because I knew he would not sing my praise for long, and I was going to make sure of it. I set my plan in motion a few days later by calling my uncle to show up at the house, as it was really important. Uncle Stuart arrived and told him that I was trying to start up a property management company and that I needed his help with that. I told him that there was this deal worth $100,000, but I needed to show proof of multiple properties. I told my uncle that my house would have been ideal, but I could not use that house that I live in. I asked if he could maybe sign his house in my name, but it was just going to be until the deal was sealed and he would, get 40% of the profit. And he could use it to deal with his financial issue. I saw my uncle's eyes light up with greed. My uncle agreed to it without even wasting a second, and within a few days the document was signed. He began to anticipate $40,000 and constantly called to check up on how the whole thing was going. I always told him to give me a little time, as the deal was about to be closed. I purposely dragged him along just for the fun of it, and after a while I began to avoid his calls, and when he came to the house, just to see me, I would ask the people around me to tell him that I was not disposed to receive visitors. Well, Uncle Stuart steadily grew impatient, and after a while, as he soon came to the house to pour out his frustration, I was not at home then. But when I came, my parents sat me down to ask me what kind of business deal I had going on with my uncle. I told them that it was not a serious thing, but they insisted that whatever it was must be serious because my uncle had been to the house earlier that day and he was blowing hot. He claimed that I was avoiding him because I did not want to pay him his money. I laughed it off and told my parents that the whole thing was under control. Uncle Stuart showed up at the house yesterday, and he was not as humble as he used to be. His facade showed that he was angry, and I acted like I didn't know the cause, and I greeted him, but he just went straight to the business of the day, which was demanding that I pay him his money immediately. My parents were there, and I did not want to reveal what I was doing, so I promised him that I was going to give him the money in a week. And he just stood up and threatened to take legal action against me if I did not give him his money by the weekend. Well, I didn't say anything, but I was glad that his true colors were gradually unfolding for the world to see. This was somebody who claimed he was sorry for how he had treated us in the past, right? But he was now threatening to deal with me if I did not pay him what he felt was his money. I know that he's only paranoid because the deadline that his creditors gave him is fast approaching, and I'm anxiously waited for the weekend when I'll finally make him see who the real fool is. Just be on the lookout for my next update. Update number 3. I ask you to look out for this update, and I'm glad to tell you that the 7-year-old grudge that I have against my uncle has finally been expressed. You know, he gave me until the weekend to pay him his money, right? Well, I've paid him back in coins, and my parents are currently not talking to me because of that, though I know that they'll come around after a while. The deadline that my uncle gave me was, 5 days ago? And he came to the house to look for me, and he was told that I was not back from the office. So he came straight down to my firm to still raise some dust, and that's when I dropped the absolute bombshell on him. You ready for this? I didn't let him speak much. I just told him that I had no money to give him, and the last money he got from me was the last he would ever get. I asked him to leave my office premises and never come too close to my home for as long as he lived, otherwise I was going to get him absolutely arrested, booked, and sentenced. Uncle Stuart reacted just as I hoped he would. He cursed. He promised to drag me to court for not holding up the end of the agreement after using his house to rake in over $100,000. He was about to leave when I interrupted him. I told him that I did not want him around my home anymore, and that included the one where he was currently living. See, my uncle looked at me like he did not hear me correctly. I repeated myself very clearly, but this time around I explained further what my statement meant. I reminded him that the property he called his home he signed to me, so it's mine. My uncle said that I was talking trash, but I pulled the document out where he had signed it and showed him the details, the fine details. In this bid to take advantage of the opportunity to secure $40,000, he let his greed blind him to the point that he did not go through the documents that he signed. I opened it and read the part where it clearly stated that he was selling his house to me for the initial amount that had been collected from me when he claimed his health was in jeopardy. My uncle did not want to accept the fact that he had just lost his home, but I simply told him that he had 3 days to vacate my home with his family, otherwise I would personally come there and throw him out with police. He felt that I was joking him, but 2 days ago was my deadline and I did not show mercy. I went there with cops and bundled him up and got his household out of my property. It was like a dream, well, a nightmare in his case, for my uncle, and he did not know what to do, but his ego did not let him beg, and he carried his family to places I don't know where. So, my parents heard about what had transpired, and they were cross with me. They asked me to make things right with my uncle, but I warned them that if they ever brought up this issue again, then they would leave my house and go live with him since they wanted to be stupid. My parents were shocked to have, been talked to me like this, but it's okay with me, because listen, Uncle Stuart showed up at the house yesterday and he did not bring his ego along with him. Nope. His winery had been taken over by the folks who he borrowed money from after he failed to pay. Uncle Stuart pleaded with me, begged as his family was stranded and needed a place to go. He wanted to recount the litany of the things that his family was going through, but I did not let him speak. I immediately had him thrown out as my parents watched, and I've gotten a restraining order against my old uncle. I'm currently engaged, and I'll soon send my parents to go and live in that house that I took from my uncle, but I've warned them not to let my uncle stay anywhere close, otherwise they would join him in living on the streets. Would you say that I did the right thing? Let me know in the comment section down below.